facilitate the section.
All right, we're recording.
Okay, great. So thanks everyone for being here. And we're going to hear shortly from a development update from Adam Moore, which is our Parks Development Coordinator. And as a reminder, we are going to be using the last 30 minutes of our monthly PARB meetings for process updates for members of PARB, as well as inviting boards and liaison, and then including the public on the development of Bowman Bray, Balfour, and Scott Parks. This item is informational only, and larger public engagement opportunities with the community are going to be scheduled at other times and shared with this group and posted on the city website. Members of the community are welcome to listen to our PARB meetings and hear about the important upcoming dates and processes, but we'll email any questions to the parkprojects@milwaukieoregon.gov for staff to follow up with them. We appreciate the interest and participation from everyone present and want them to stay engaged as the parks development process proceeds, but the parks updates can also be found at milwaukeeoregon.gov/parkprojects. Questions asked to staff at tonight's meeting may require staff to follow up individually or at next month's meeting. Questions can be sent to staff ahead of the PARB meetings, and staff will attempt to answer them at our upcoming meeting. Specific requests related to boards, commissions, and associations may require a special meeting with that group to address. Please reach out to staff to discuss. And these meetings will be recorded and available on the city's YouTube channel. So tonight we're going to be discussing and pretty much establishing what that 30 minutes is going to look like for the parks development updates. And we're also going to hear a short update from Adam after we've set and made a motion and voted on what those 30 minutes are going to look like starting next week. So it's important for us to set those procedures so that we're consistent in our future meetings and the public knows and understands what they can expect for when they come. And Ben and I met with our potential, or excuse me, yes, we met with our staff to discuss the potential framework, and we came up with a couple of suggestions. We came up with PARB meetings will be in a webinar format for the last 30 minutes. So in the last 30 minutes, it will be in a webinar format with PARB members as the starting panelists. So what that means is basically we would have an opportunity for those 30 minutes to give out those updates, and us as PARB members would be able to discuss and ask questions. At the start of the parks development agenda items, staff will promote predetermined liaisons as panelists. So as liaisons from other boards can also be a part of that panelist committee. Community members who represent a group or would like to extend an invitation to a group to serve as liaisons in these meetings may reach out to staff at parkprojects@milwaukeeoregon.gov, and staff will follow up with them to discuss. The Parks Development Update agenda can be structured as follows. Natalie, did you want to discuss it or would you want me to?
It's up to you. I know that's a lot of text you just read, so I always like to give people a break if they want. For those, just for clear transparency, we knew there was a lot of information to read out, so that's why we typed it up. Just
so that way we don't miss anything. So that also may sound like I'm a little robotic right now. So that I can just briefly go. So one of the options that we came up with is at 5:30. So again, our PARB meetings would go as normal. Our agenda items would be covered between 4:30 and 5:30. But starting at 5:30, when we open it up to the public and to our liaisons to discuss the park updates, we would start with the agenda items. Adam would really take over the first part of that and update with any sort of movement that he has made in terms of the park design. And then from there, we would have questions from PARB members, and we would be using the hand raising feature. And then we would move into questions from board, committee, and association liaisons. So this would be people from Arbor Board, the Arts Committee. Others that would be a part of the planning phase would then also be able to ask some clarifying questions. And then we would open it up to a group discussion. So this would be open for PARB and liaison. So again, remember, this is a webinar platform. So the panelists would be the PARB and then the liaison members and other board members. And then if we have time, we would take questions from the public. And the questions can be timed depending on the time remaining in the minutes. Oh my God, I'm getting a bunch of like notifications while I'm doing this. The questions can be timed depending on the time remaining in the meeting. So we would suggest like 3 minutes for questions. Again, clarification questions. And if there is no time, then they can ask through the email at the Parks Projects at Milwaukie, and then the staff will respond. So that's one option. Questions so far? I know I've talked a lot, so it's hard to listen to like one person talking. Questions on that option?
So just to summarize, yeah, like I was saying, starting out as a webinar format at the Zoom meeting. And what that means is our PARB would proceed exactly as everyone's experienced it. And then what it does is it makes it so if we have community members who want to join in for community comments of PARB, we can invite them in and out. And then when the time comes for the parks development update, then we kind of do the same thing. The reason why is just because well, right now, there's not that many folks who are stepping, except for, hi, Kate, nice to see you. In the future, there might be upwards of a dozen, maybe, people who want to join in to listen. So just to make sure that these meetings are PARB meetings and that they keep kind of on track with that.
And then the main focus is just for Adam to give information, that this is not one of the big major public engagements where they'll really be able to have an opportunity to share their opinions, because that is one thing that we want to be mindful of, is that it doesn't turn into that. And then, we don't use our time wisely or it goes over. So one way of using the webinar platform is that guests can come and listen and get information, and that at a later time, they can be in a more appropriate setting to ask questions.
Just to give you an idea, I've been thinking about these updates as a place to recap and preview the news, not where we're going to be making the news. So we're going to have lots of other meetings, lots of other opportunities, Engage Milwaukie, all sorts of things going on where we're going to dive into design, dive into other things. We're not going to be doing this in 15 minutes. That's not fair to you. That's not fair to PARB. That's not fair to the public. We've got a lot of time to talk about these things. This is just a bullet point recap.
Mm-hmm.
That was one option. Sorry, Natalie, did you want to add anything else?
Oh, I was just going to ask Adam if you could recap kind of what invitations went out for liaisons.
Yeah, so we invited, Kate is here. Kate is from the Lake Road NDA. We also reached out by email to Historic Milwaukie NDA and the Ardenwald NDA. We have not heard back from them. I will follow up. The library board did not meet in February, but they will meet in March, and they will have a liaison to this project. They're very interested in Scott Park, as you might imagine, considering it's right outside the library. We have reached out to Equity Steering Committee, and I will have more news on Equity Steering Committee. We will eventually try to have just a point person with Equity Steering Committee, but I'll talk more about that later. We've also approached Arts Committee, did not hear back, and we're talking about tree board, arbor board, to see if they want to be involved.
Thanks, Adam.
So that was one idea, and mostly to pay attention to was really just the formatting of the webinar. That's really kind of the main part of this first option. The other option was to have a similar agenda. So 5:30, Adam would give us updates, answer any questions from our last meeting, and then questions from PARB members and liaisons as one joint body. So in this second option, we would not move into a webinar framework. Right? Is that right, Natalie? It
would just be kind of the first option is, do we want it tiered where it goes PARB member questions,
Got it.
then liaison questions and members of the public, or are you guys comfortable with just kind of having a larger group and opening it up to questions, knowing that PARB members might have questions that will get answered, but you can always email staff directly if needed.
Yeah. And then the same follows as if there's time, questions to the public, if not, emailed. So those are two options. Are there any questions from PARB members or suggestions?
We talked about this last time, but just to mention that, like, if there are topics that we want to spend more than just 15 minutes on, obviously we can have special PARB meetings. We can decide as a group to designate an entire meeting to this. Also, the other groups are always welcome to reach out to me, reach out through the Parks Project email address and say, hey, can you come down to our neighborhood association and talk to us about that? And we can work to fit that in during the process as well. So there's going to be lots of opportunities to spend time on this project.
So a clarifying question. So one of the options is just to give the updates, not take comment or questions. Correct? Is that correct?
It's really, so it's taking questions from, so the question, we have kind of these three audiences who are listening into these updates. We have PARB, this is the PARB meeting. We have the liaisons that have been invited to take information back to their boards and committees or groups. And then we have the general public. And we just wanted to get a gut check with PARB on whether or not, did you guys want to hold special time for PARB members' questions to get them answered directly from staff before liaisons and then before the general public? Or is everyone comfortable with liaisons and PARB members kind of all being as a group and asking questions together and not having a prioritization of PARB members over other liaisons? We're asking that just because we want to respect that this is a PARB meeting and we don't want you to feel like we're taking your time. So we just wanted to really see, you know, what is your opinion on holding special time for PARB members' questions, or whether or not you feel like you're comfortable having kind of liaisons and everyone ask questions at the same time.
I'm comfortable with everyone being able to ask questions, not prioritizing PARB members, unless it's, you know, as we get the agendas ahead of time, unless it's something that, you know, as a body, we decide, okay, for this certain topic, maybe we should give PARB members priority. But I don't, as far as what you just said, I don't have a problem with everyone being part of the question asking process.
Same here.
I agree with Desi. I know for me, I'd have trouble. I might have a question and then somebody else asks a question. I'm like, oh, that was so cool. I didn't even think of that. Now I have a follow up to their question, but my time's already passed. So no, you know. And also, if it becomes a problem, can we change it later?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything is flexible. We just want to make sure that you guys know that you have the power to set your agenda and kind of how this meeting flows. So I'm hearing kind of favoring having just the group format together with the liaisons and the board members. And I am going to ask you guys somebody to motion and somebody to approve that structure.
So I move to
Approve the group structure, we'll say.
the group structure, or the end of, or any the group structure of PARB meetings to include all folks being able to ask questions at the end.
Before we move forward, did Jenny start to say something when I started to talk?
No, I'm just saying. I just say I agree with what Desi said.
Oh, you wanted to say the same. Okay, then I second Desi's motion.
Yeah, proof.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Awesome.
Okay, it's passed. Yay.
So then now, Allie, you get to introduce Adam for his section.
Yes, so now we have Adam who's going to
Can
go
I just-
ahead and
I'm sorry, real quick. Can I just say thank you for working on this? Because this can be tricky in other meetings, right? And so like having this defined structure really helps everyone who's part of it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because we, as staff, we didn't want to make the decision for PARB and we didn't want to make the decision for how this conversation would go with the public. We feel it's really, really important that, you know, you all are deciding how we engage with you not the city deciding how we engage with the public or our other representative boards of the public. So we're glad that we took the time for this. I'm going to try and be really quick. There's one really important topic at the end of my update that I want to spend time on, and I need some interaction from all of you. We might go over time here a little bit, so just a fair warning on that. Okay, so the project officially kicked off with our consultants on February 2nd. We had a staff meeting with all of our consultants and NCPRD staff. We jumped right into gathering reports that includes park surveys, tree evaluations, arborist reports, utility investigations. So you might start seeing people out at the parks already. We're also reviewing the 2015 plan and engagement notes. So big shout out to Heather and NCPRD. They have provided us with all the engagement notes that they have from the previous work. So we're able to actually reach out to the people who are involved in those plans and make sure that their comments are honored as we work to redefine and refine, I should say, the Bowman Bray and Belfour Park. So thank you, Heather, for that. We've already mentioned a couple times that we have a project email address, parkprojects@milwaukieoregon.gov. Please use that if you've got questions or comments. Happy to answer them. And maybe if I get a lot of questions on a topic, I'll make sure I address them at these meetings as well. It's not live yet, but we will have a project website, which is milwaukeeoregon.gov/parkprojects. I have a couple updates for the engagement schedule. So we've talked a little bit about rough timelines. It's still very rough, but I want to mention this because I think it shows this how early we are in the process. Our first large engagement session will be focused on Scott Park, and that will be either the last week of April or the first week of May. That will be virtual and led by our consultants. We will then follow up immediately with an online survey that will be done through Engage Milwaukie. We're going to be using postcard mailers, emails, Engage Milwaukie, city website, yard signs, flyers, the March PARB meeting, the Equity Steering Committee, and everything short of writing it in the sky to let people know that we're having that meeting. We have discussed doing live events, like in-person events, either in parks or maybe in the library and future events, but there just wasn't enough time for us to do an in-person one as soon as the end of April and early May. To give you an idea of what the rest of the engagement schedule looks like, the second round for Scott Park and the first round for Belfour and Bowman Bray Park, those will be in like June or July, with a third round in the fall, probably the end of September, early October. We'll also be utilizing focus groups. We're not exactly sure how we're going to use them. Part of that's going to be up to the Equity Steering Committee and also PARB. I'll talk about that in a second. But I do think that we're going to have 5 focus groups instead of just 3. So now the big part, and I know I led off by saying, you know, this is where you're going to get a recap and a preview of the news. However, I do have a little bit of news here. So we've mentioned that we want to have the public collaborate with us and help define the public involvement plan. Originally, we were going to work this through the full Equity Steering Committee, but Equity Steering Committee just had their second meeting. They're still working on bylaws, and they're doing also a citywide equity lens. And so we thought like bringing this into them so early on might be kind of disruptive to their full meeting. So what we've decided to do is we are going to be having a 2-hour equity engagement kickoff meeting. And we've invited 3 to 4 members, or there's 3 or 4 members of the Equity Steering Committee who will be joining us. It will be led by our consultants, and they are going to help define how equity relates to and guides this project, working with our consultants. They're going to help determine what actual equity-based engagement means. They're going to talk about and help define what the opportunities and constraints on the public planning process are and how to work with public engagement through this project. And then they're also going to help us identify how best to use focus groups. So that's when to do them, how to do them, who to invite, and why, and how they can really be involved. So I mentioned we have 3 to 4 members from the Equity Steering Committee. we are looking for 3 to 4 PARB members who might also want to join. This would be a one-time 2-hour meeting. You would see a draft version of the public involvement plan. You would collaborate with our consultants. Staff from the city and NCPRD have been invited, although we're really looking to make this a kind of community-led process because we've already kind of put our constraints on terms of like deadlines and budgets and things like that on there. So, and then what we can do is we can present at later PARB meetings and equity steering committee meetings what the public involvement plan looked like going into that meeting, what was discussed at that meeting, and how it might have changed at future meetings. So my question to all of you is, does PARB want to be involved? And if so, do we have 3 or 4 meetings who would like to be involved? We know that this will be coming up very soon. It's still to be determined, but the early favorite for the meeting time would be Monday, March 14th at 5 p.m. And that's a 2-hour meeting. And it would be mostly PARB and Equity Steering Committee members and our consultants with some city staff and NCPRD staff present. That's all I got.
I think it would be great to have PARB members, and my hand is raised because I would be one of those people, or I'd like to.
So anyone else who would like to join us other than Allie?
Come on, guys.
I can do it. I just, let me confirm, let me look at my calendar, but I am interested.
Yeah, and there will be, if you are interested, I will send you a doodle poll. There are lots of options. We are kind of limited on time on this, but this would be a way for you all to help early on, help us define what equity means, right? It's not up to me, a city staff with a lot of agency, particularly given who I am, to define what that means. So this is for you all to help us early on in the process, working with the consultants that we hired to do this. So Allie and Martine.
I'm a yes.
I would also say that, while the kind of focus of our work is obviously, racial and ethnic equity, that is a topic that spans many different demographics and intersects with a lot of different options of our lives. So a lot of time when I talk about equity, I talk about my experiences growing up in Flint, and then my last 5 years that I spent working in Flint from 2014 to 2020. So, there are lots of different ways to think about it, right? We think about it in terms of gender. We talk about it in terms of sexual orientation and identity. We talk about it in terms of class. So there are a lot of different ways that this intersects. So don't sit back and say, well, I want to leave room open. We appreciate that. But this is really open to all residents to get involved here. So.
Jenny, was your hand up as well? Do you want to be a part of it, or?
Yeah, sure. And there's a conflict. I'll check my schedule though.
Well, Adam, I would be a part of it. I mean, it's great to be a Michigan Wolverine, right? So, but I don't know. So we already had 3 folks volunteer for this. So
we will, Desi, you are always welcome on this project. I hope you know that. And we did ask for 3 or 4. And so I don't see anybody else. I don't see anybody else volunteering. So what I will do is I will follow up right away with an email to a doodle poll, and you will all be able to kind of select the times that you would like to kind of see this meeting. It would be in the evening, either 5 to 7 or 5:30 to 7, and the early favorite is Monday, March 14th.
My only question / concern is, like, in this group, will there be, how do I say this the right way? But I just want to make sure that, like, all of our groups are being represented, and even our folks who, like, might use wheelchairs our disabled folks. Is there, and I know that in a perfect world, yeah, everyone could be in that space, but I'm just wondering, is there going to be a possibility to have somebody who, you know, I don't want a white guy to talk about what a black man would need, and I wouldn't want to talk about what somebody who's disabled would need. You know
Yeah,
what
I think that's a great point, and that is part of why we want to open this up to other groups, because I don't want to be making that decision. When we put out the RFQ to hire consultants, we looked for experience in several different ways, and one of them was making sure that we are creating inclusive parks, and that includes all sorts of different differently abled people. We have talked as a project team and consultant as a city what type of groups we would like to, for lack of a better term, target in these focus groups. And I would say that, you know, trying to find, you know, back in Michigan, we had the Disability Network, and we would often work very closely with them and to help get the word out to those groups to make sure that they're involved. I know that we have a high focus on this project to ensure that we are looking at universal access, not just ADA. And so, you know, that's partly why we thought that we needed to go from 3 focus groups to 5 focus groups, is to really kind of open this up and then let you all tell us, who do we need to be talking to in this? Obviously, we're going to try and invite everyone to the large public meetings and get them involved in every way that we can. But we want to really try to make sure that any sort of marginalized voices are brought to the front and amplified as best we can.
And just to Counselor Desi's point, also thinking about not just physically non-able bodies, but also thinking of like neuroatypical folks as well, especially if we're trying to be an all-inclusive park. You know, being mindful of students who have, people who have just different sensitivities to various situations, and you know, safe place for students or people to go. Holy.
Yeah, and I know Heather had sent me an email after Heather Gates had sent me, or Baskerville, excuse me, had sent me an email after the last meeting and said, hey, have you heard of Harper's Playgrounds? Well, actually, Greenworks, who we're working with on this project, just finished up Cooch Park in Portland. That is a Harper's Playground. A couple of the other consultants who also submitted to our RFQ process were involved in other Harper's Playgrounds.
Sorry, can you explain? I have not heard of Harper's Playground.
Harper's Playgrounds is a nonprofit who looks to advocate for universally accessible playgrounds. So thinking about what you were just talking about, like not only just being ADA accessible, which in terms of like parks and playgrounds can mean like those engineered wood fibered, the mulch wood chip safety surface, that meets ADA compliancy, right? Those large step platforms, those are designed so like people pull themselves out of wheelchairs and then like go up on the play structure. Well, there was a dad who had a daughter named Harper who brought his daughter Harper to the park, and she uses a walker, and she looked at the playground and said, there's no way I can get there. And so this is a group that started out to try and find ways to overcome that. And so they look at making sure that the playground is available to all of them. Greenworks nailed that section of the proposal. And we really like the sub-consultants that they're going to be bringing in to work with on that. And we do have an opportunity to have the sub-consultant on inclusive play or on playground safety, and then Greenworks come in and do a discussion on inclusive play and what that really means. And so that we can learn as a city what to maybe look for in future park projects as well.
I have 2 things. One is in the proposals, I really liked some of them. The people mentioned like a walk to orient people with autism, or I suppose anxiety also to like help people calm down. So that's one way that the neural stuff is accommodated. And also there were some really cool ideas in the proposals, the RFQ proposals, about public engagement. So are those going to be brought forth as like, these are different options that have been presented so far?
Yeah, so if you're talking about what we're going to be discussing at this, park equity engagement kickoff, we're having trouble coming up with a name. That's the best one we came up with. The consultants are going to provide a draft public involvement plan, and we are going to discuss lots of different options that we have for this. And in addition to like what we've already talked about, this is the opportunity to help inform us, the city, what you would like to see.
I guess I mean more the applicants that weren't selected. Some of them had really good ideas, in my opinion, about public engagement. So could those ideas that they presented be shared by like you or somebody that has read the applications, RFQ applications, so that that idea can be considered?
Yeah, I don't think that I will bring them up at this meeting, but we are taking ideas from every place that we can find them and discussing those as a project team. And yeah, there are things that we saw in other proposals that we were like, hey, we saw this. Can you do this as well?
And just one more question, and maybe this is better for the next meeting, like the March 14th or whichever date we choose is. But just thinking about in anticipation of increasing our engagement for our community members and knowing that we want people to come regardless of their backgrounds. Also considering the different languages that may be present, has just in anticipation of that, has there been a discussion about having translators, like live translators available for these virtual webinar meetings?
So we're not quite sure what to do with PARB meetings and these updates yet. I think Natalie kind of touched on that. That's something that we're working on. The city website is sort of a larger thing that we're working on. Everything on this project, however, that we produce that is digital or paper will be translated into Spanish and reviewed for cultural appropriateness by our consultants. Also, every live meeting that we do, we will have Spanish interpretation. We also have access to a number of other languages should we feel that they are necessary or be requested. That includes American Sign Language. We included that in our RFQ. Also, when we do online surveys, the questions will be in both English and Spanish, and any answers that we get in Spanish will be, any questions we get in Spanish will be translated in English so everyone can see it, and vice versa. And then any answers that we give will be translated from English into Spanish or vice versa. And the intention is that we are going to try to make sure that everything is available to people in the same place for this project. And we're going to try and take what we learned from this project and apply it to other parts of the city. The goal would be that people don't have to go other places to look for something that they can read or understand. That is really challenging for these types of meetings. My Spanish is limited to a very small amount. My Russian's a lot better. So if any of you guys have any questions in Russian, let me know. Actually, I should be careful in saying that my Russian is not good enough to answer questions. Yeah, we're trying to work out how to do this. But any of our live meetings that we do, there will be Spanish interpretation available at those meetings.
I'll also throw in there, I know one thing that the city's been working on, and we mentioned it before, is our equity program manager working with our communications program manager to talk about kind of how equitable communication looks. Government is filled with guidelines and things passed from other governments. So usually they say something like, I think it's 3%. If any sort of demographic greater than 3% requires translation. We know that that's not always true And especially in a community like Milwaukie, where we're really small, but we might have some really great groups who are very active. So if there are recommendations, groups to tap into, groups that you would appreciate having translation that's not excluded to Spanish, but it's also other languages, let us know. That we really appreciate knowing that and having those connections. So that way, when we go to, justify costs for translations, we can say, hey, look, we already know that these groups reached out and they would appreciate it. So.
Yeah. And Desi just wanted me to let you guys know that his computer died. So that's why he had the frozen.
I just thought he was napping with his eyes.
I tried to get a picture of it and it disappeared before I could send it to him, but he wanted me to relay that information. And then the other, and then just to follow up with that, like I do speak Spanish, so I would need to like practice a little bit more before I could say I can interpret or I definitely can't translate, but I can interpret if necessary. But then, I know that there are plenty of people for hire, but my mom is also a translator, interpreter, so we could always ask for her help if needed.
We do have our consultants available for select stakeholder group meetings. So if there's a special PARB meeting where we're devoting the entire meeting to this, we can look at bringing them in for those meetings. And so that would be one of those meetings where we're making news as opposed to like just reporting it out.
Right.
But for future PARB events and stuff, I'm sure it's always, especially if we do an ad hoc volunteer thing, it's always nice to have folks who are comfortable translating.
Yeah.
Heather, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I was just going to add really quickly, we've had a really good experience using interpretation services like ERCO. They're really cost effective, and you're not trying to get a subject matter expert, but you are getting someone who speaks the language natively. So anyway, I would give that a plug too. It takes a little bit of planning, but not even that much, and it's pretty low cost for the service you get.
And I'll say the city does have a by telephone translation service. So if there's anyone who wants to talk to the city at any point, we're able to at least call them over the phone and actually have some capability for live translation.
And Gary, I think I saw your hands up. No. Then just one more thing I would say is just like, as we move forward, really being incredibly clear that we have those opportunities, because I fear that would be a barrier if someone didn't know that there would be some way for their voice to be heard or understand the information, that they wouldn't want to go. So just as moving forward, that's my last thing I'll say.
Yeah. And I will just want to mention that, these are sometimes difficult conversations to have. These are new things that we're trying. Sometimes we're going to misspeak. We're going to try not to assume intention when someone misspeaks, and we're just going to try and work together as we learn about this process. I'm not an expert in this, and I have a lot of bias, and I have a lot of privilege in my life, and so I'm learning just as well as everybody else. And a big part of that is transparency. And that's why we're trying to, in this process, put everything out to the community and let you all inform us and make you involved in the process as much as possible. If there's one thing that I learned from my experiences in Flint, it's that, giving room for conversations to happen is a very big part of all of this. We're not going to get it right the first time, but we're going to keep trying and working with all of you to learn more.
And I know we have to go, and this isn't a very important question. So if we need to go, I can wait. I'm just curious, how much does the city spend on translation and interpretation services, like per year? Because I'm wondering if it would be more cost effective and definitely more empowering to, instead of translating and interpreting, offering anybody that needs it a free class to help them get good English, so that they don't need any interpretation.
That's a good question on city budget. We're actually releasing a new budget document, I think this April, which should have a line item for that. I don't know how much we spend. I know that it's a smart investment for spending on translation services, because we do get folks calling all the time who might not be able to spend time on a special class. But I think that there are also some nonprofit services for ESL as a second language.
Yeah, usually the community college will offer classes, like night classes for adults or something like
Mhm.
that.
I would say I have plenty of time, but I know you all have limited time and we are already over. So this might be a good time to check with all of you to see if you want to, what you want to do with tonight's meeting.
I guess questions from PARB and liaisons as a group. Any other questions?
Okay, well, I'm not seeing any other questions, so we should adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting at 6:15?
Motion.
And an outfit change.
I'm back.
You're-
Oh, before we motion, I just want to say nice work, you all. This is the type of work that I joined this board for, and I'm just like kicking myself because I can't participate, and I want to, and I'm so proud of you all for like doing such great work, and I know you guys are going to do great work from the city side and from the PARB. So I just want to throw that in from that. That's me. So I motion to end.
I'll
Martha?
second it. I'll second it. I figured out my mute. So anyway, I wanted to say thank you to Ben for the letter that he wrote in support of the funding for the park. That was great. So, and I
Yay.
second the motion to
Awesome
end the
job.
meeting.
All right, well, with that, our meeting is done at 6:16, and with our first full PARB numbers. Yay, that's awesome and exciting. All right. Well,
You
with
guys
that,
rock.
stop.
And if you guys have any other questions, feel free to email Adam or I directly, or email the Parks Projects email. So parksprojects@milwaukieoregon.gov for any suggestions and thoughts and such. We're here.
Thanks,
Right.
guys. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good night.
See ya.